program tonight, I want to look at something that was said. I was looking up some articles the other night, reading through some different articles from different places, and I'd ran across one of the articles that was a congressional hearing, and the military, the Marines, had one of their commandants there to talk to the Congress about the state of the military and that of which the military has to draw from, this our public. The military leader told the Congress something that was very striking. It's ugly and it's frightening, but it is a telltale sign and story of what is wrong and what has gone wrong in the United States of America, and how America will not be able to stand and survive as a world power. Now, someone may say, what difference does it make to be a world power? You shouldn't want to excel and be the world power. Well, what it means is very simply this, is that if we're not the world power, then somebody else will be. And who will it be? Will it be China, a communist country? Would it be Russia, a communist country? If America falls, the West falls. And there's only one thing left to be the power of the world. If you think it's bad or evil to be on top, then you'll find out what bad and evil truly is when someone more wicked than yourself is on top. Here's what the commandant said to the Congress concerning the youth of this nation and of this generation. It said, Marine Corps Commandant states that less than 30% of young men and women are qualified to join the military. Quote, it's a strategic issue that less than 30% of the young men and women in our nation are qualified just to join the military, either because of physical, mental, or moral issues. So now, the commandant says, we're down to 30%, and now we have to find those that have the propensity or are interested in doing this. That is, serving our country, serving our nation. Less than 30% of the youth in the United States in this generation, less than 30% are qualified not to just be fighters and involved in war, but just to join the armed services of our country. Now, don't think that there's not nations round about us that's looking and knowing that America is a nation on decline, in decline. There is no way possible to maintain a fighting machine when we have mental illness and sickness, weakness, such as seen nowhere else in the world. And from this, we have to draw and create a military force who then fights and protects us and stops evil people from conquering us and with great intent of evil ruling over us. More than 70% of this generation is unfit to even join the military. Now, what is that but a ringing indictment against the parents of this particular generation? You see, things pretty much started here, and what we see now is the mindset of parenting and raising children. Most of it started back in the Dust Bowl, the Dust Bowls of America, the Great Depression, times that was as hard as you could possibly imagine. People making homes in railroad cars, boxcars, campfires spread out all along the highways, people sleeping on the road and doing whatever they could and anything they could to simply earn enough money to feed themselves and to feed their families for that day. And then they would worry about surviving again tomorrow. Now, one thing about those days is the men were raised to be men because they had to be. The strongest of the species, the strongest, had to be strong. And the women, providers and raisers of the children, doing the very best that they could do, doing without themselves to make sure that their children had food to eat. One thing for sure, during the days of the Great Depression, during the Dust Bowl days, during this time of economic collapse, of sorrow and labor such as you'd never known. One thing about it, mankind did not have time to concern himself with issues such as whether or not a man can call himself a woman and go into a women's bathroom. Whenever a nation can concern themselves with the rights of whether or not two men has the right to get married, or if we can kill a baby at 5 months old inside of a womb or 8 months old inside of a womb, or if the big fight and the big struggle of the time is that if a person believes that they're another sex than what they were born, then they should have the right to do this. And this reaching the levels of the president and the Congress and the Senate. I mean, these critical issues of, do you have a right as a born man to go into a woman's bathroom because that day you decide that you just feel like you're a woman? All of this mess that I just made mention of, whether or not a goldfish in California has a right to survive, so much so that you cut the water off of hundreds of thousands of people and dry their fields up. Whenever this kind of thinking is taking place and this becomes the policy issues of the day, it simply testifies to one thing, and does so very clearly. You have become a nation with far too much time on your hands. Now, back during the Dust Bowls and back during the Great Depression, the hard times, men had their minds on living, surviving, their children eating. What it made was it made a generation of strong people. It made a people determined to come out of it. It hardened the people. After that came the 50s. And that generation that grew up sleeping beside roads, homes and boxcars, fighting to survive in tents. They had babies and they set it in their minds and they set it in their hearts that my children will never know the pain I knew. They will never know the trouble I knew. They will never be inflicted with the hardships that I had to face. So whatever they want, we're going to give it to them. That's where the mindset began. Shortly after that mindset began, and it's understandable, you have to sometimes have more discipline coming out of trouble than you even had in trouble. No matter what happened to you, no matter what the hardships were upon you, no matter what you had to face in life, does not mean that there can ever be a generation or children raised without the basic responsibilities of life taught to them. But coming out of that hardship, they wanted to cushion it and make it as easy as they could. Remove any kind of stress, heartache, or trouble from their children. What that brought forth then soon was the 60s, the pot generation. Because you see, when you raise children as royalty, and understand, the Bible said that foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, bound. It's tied to it. It's locked to it. What you are raising is a fool, a potential fool, maybe more than that, a guaranteed fool, for foolishness is bound in his heart, as it is in all of our hearts. God gives us children to go through a raising period where they're absolutely blank computers. God designed it that way so that we could train them. Train them. Train a child in the way he is to go. That's what the Bible says. When we allow emotions to cloud our vision and darken our sight, to the point that we think that children are best served by facing no problems or difficulties, to think that children should be raised as royalty, and then wonder why you have a narcissistic generation that follows that. Well, again, after the particular mindset set in that our children are going to be coddled and pampered and petted and give everything that they want, and we're not going to force anything upon them, we're going to let them enjoy life, they soon found the pot. In the days of, the hippie movement, the free love movement, the do what you want to do. Best stated in a song of that era. It's your thing. Do what you want to do. That was the motto. That is what came about from a generation that was raised as royalty. When we raise them as royalty, you see, they have to understand. You have to know that whenever a child is born, the only way that he can let you know that he is not comfortable is to scream. The only way he can let you know he's hungry is to scream. The only way he can let you know that he's wet on himself is he screams. Because it is his only means of communication. And that screaming for what he wants and screaming for attention, that screaming and expecting results, is okay for a while because it's the child's only means of communication. But shortly enough, the child has learned other skills. He's learned other communicating skills. And all of a sudden, at 1 or 8 months, 9 months, 1.5 years old, it's not okay for him to scream anymore and expect results. He has to be taught. You now have other skills and other means of communications that has evolved, and those means of communications is what I will demand out of you now. You ask for what you want. You do not scream for it. But if by 2 that they're not taught the only thing that they ever knew, that if I want it, scream for it, cry for it, and then expect to get it. If the child has not learned that at 2, he's not going to know it at 4. If he don't know it by 4, he's not going to know it at 6. At 6, he's not going to know it at 10. At 10, he's not going to know it at 20. And on it goes. At some point, the training process has to take place. Well, we left the pot generation that brought to us the political bodies of, Bill Clinton, the first of the pot generation to sit in the White House. He disrespected and perverted the office with filth that he did right in the office. But we're raised royalty. And whatever we want, we get. It doesn't make any difference where it is or what the rules are. They don't apply to us right now. Felony after felony after felony after felony after felony. This bunch is committed. this pothead generation. And they never have to pay for it. I can do whatever I want to do. Well, because it's the only thing that they've ever known to do. They started out crying and squalling for what they wanted, believing then that it didn't matter what the book said, it didn't matter what mama said, it doesn't matter what daddy says, it doesn't matter what a preacher says, it doesn't matter what the Bible says. If I want it, I'm supposed to have it. Because the world revolves around me, I was raised as royalty. Then we left the pot generation, teaching us through the Clintons that morals did not matter in politics. That's what they said. Then we moved into the crack generation. Now we're facing the crack generation and the insanity that it is bringing. And the next generation is the porn generation. The brain's completely rewired and twisted to a degree that you cannot even imagine, that so warps the human path. Scientists telling us now that it is far more addictive and disturbing and destructive to the brain than cocaine and heroin. It's bad enough to be on it at 40 or 50. But when you're introduced to it now, as is commonplace with the cell phones and like, that at 10, 11, and 12, they have already introduced themselves. No generation has ever survived the sexual misconduct. Sodom and Gomorrah didn't survive it. Rome didn't survive it. And America won't survive it. It is the final straw. It is what brings in horror because of twisted and rerouted brains that become nothing more than subhumans. You cannot raise a child to believe that the child is God, that what it wants it gets because the world revolves around it. No. Surely, you should teach your babies. You should tell your children. We should tell them, you're everything to me. You're my life. You're my love. I would die for you 10,000 times over. But come here, son, and let me explain to you. Where you are everything to us in this house. When you leave this house and go out into that world, you are in the midst of people then that don't even know you. And you are either going to learn now that the world does not revolve around you, or you're going to learn it the hard way when you get out in the world who don't know you and don't see you as royalty. Say after me, speaking to your son or daughter at 2, at 3, the world does not revolve around me. Say it, son. They don't know anything about this. I know they don't know anything about this stuff. That's how come they have to be taught this stuff. Or they grow up thinking the world revolves around them. And 65 and 70-year-old parents and grandparents should be waiting on them because it's all that's ever happened, while they keep their feet propped up and play their games on television. More than 70% of this generation is not fit, the military has said before Congress, to even join the armed forces. One of the saddest tales in the Bible of family is that of a priest in the Bible that was named Eli. Eli was a priest, probably a high priest, and he had sons that the Bible said were vile. And the Bible said he would not restrain them. Now, the Bible does say that Eli chastened his sons. They did wrong, and he said, you shouldn't have done that. Don't do that. Stop that. But he had no follow-up. There was no bite in his bark. There was chastening, but there was never correction. It's one thing to say, no, 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 don't, stop. It's another thing to correct it. Eli said no, but his sons kept doing what they did. Why? Because the sons knew that they were royalty. And the sons then became priests themselves in the house of God. But it didn't matter what Daddy said. So it didn't matter what the Bible said. So it didn't matter what God said. Because remember, the world revolves around us. And whatever we want, that's what we get. And so where God said to boil the meat for the meat offerings, and then to take the fat from that meat and offer it as the burnt offerings, the two boys of Eli, well, they didn't want boiled meat. They wanted their meat to be roasted. And of course, it didn't matter what the Bible said about the sacrifice. It didn't matter what God said about the sacrifice. It only mattered what they wanted, because the world revolved around them. Because Daddy would tell them no, 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 but he would never reinforce, you see. It's like the child that we've oftentimes talked about. The child that rode her bicycle or tricycle at 3 years old, rode it out into the street. Mama was standing at the door and saw the truck coming down the road and saw the baby rolling her tricycle fast as she could toward the street. And Mama hollered, "Stop, stop, stop." The baby never even looked back once. With great laughter and adrenaline rushing through her little body, she drove that tricycle right out into the road. The truck hit her, and the baby was dead. The reason for it was that the baby knew that stop, stop, stop didn't mean stop. Because stop, stop, stop never really meant stop when she was in the house or when she was playing. Regardless of what Mama said, if Mama said stop, the baby learned that she could continue to do it. Because there was no follow-up. There was no correcting. It was just stop, stop, stop. And the baby learned that the first 3 stops means nothing. It's only until we get to the 10th stop and Mama turns red in the face and throws something on the floor, only then does stop really mean stop. So when Mama hollered stop, stop, stop to the baby rolling toward the road, the baby knew she had 7 more stops left before the real one got there, and she just kept on rolling. And she's dead. We have a responsibility to train and to discipline our children. From government schools, who wants a boy to be anything but a boy? Boys are rambunctious. That's what makes them boys. And you start doping them. In the 2nd and 3rd grade, because they don't act like the girls. Oh, this is a mission of destruction, my friend. And I, with all the sadness and sorrow of my heart, I am telling you, the problems that we are now at can only be resolved by a Bible revival or a war that once again forces us to focus on the true issues of life. It's going to take one or the other. And it ain't going to be done without it.
not have carried such a heavy load. I would not stand silent as they lied on me. I would have fought back in Gethsemane. I never would have drank that bitter cup. And if they came for me, I'd never give up. But the man who came from Galilee was more of a man than me. Never would have died to set man free. And as for those who drove those nails in me, I never would have prayed, my God, forgive. I would have judged their